Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys Back at Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, a weird week in comic books last week. Diamond, one of the largest distributors for comic books, certainly they've taken some hits over the last couple of years with DC moving to Lunar and different things. But Diamond officially declared bankruptcy last week. It's chapter 11, so they'll continue to move forward. They can kind of sell pieces of their business. They can continue to operate. Eventually, if they do have to go to chapter 7 bankruptcy, I believe that's when they have to liquidate all their assets, and that would kind of be the end of Diamond. It's kind of weird because Diamond, I know the controversy around them for years was they were by and large kind of a monopoly on their own. And then when the pandemic hit, DC kind of looked for alternatives. That's why they went with Lunar, and you've kind of seen bits and pieces of that go. But I know you are friends with a couple comic book shop owners and have a little bit of insight on some of this, Mike. What are your thoughts on Diamond going bankrupt? What do you think this means for the industry? Overall, what are your thoughts?
Um, it's kind of heartbreaking and kind of needed to happen kind of thing all at once. Um, the comic shop owners here, um, for some of the older shops, um, have a litany of complaints that go back decades for Diamond. They were a monopoly, so if you were a comic shop, you had to deal with them, and a lot of times they behaved in ways that you know upset a lot of small businesses and comic shops. And the pandemic was the final blow. But you have to understand a little bit of the history of comics. These distributors, this whole idea of a distributorship that was just mainly for comics was something that was conceptualized in the 70s. Distribution was really kind of the Wild West before the 80s and the advent of the direct market. And people didn't always get their books. Some stores got this one, they didn't get that one. And so it was a necessary thing for it to come to fruition. It was inevitable, it was going to happen. And Diamond was the champion of it in the end. And it's, there's a lot of good that Diamond and, Steve Jippy, did for the hobby. You can't deny that. And there'll be a lot of Diamond haters probably on YouTube talking about, hey, it's the fall of, the
Golden
great
Grace,
one.
all that stuff.
Yeah. And, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The thing that really hurts is we don't know. The main thing that we don't know is there may not be free comic book day this year.
Yeah, Diamond was hugely
And
responsible for that.
that's huge. But what really was the nail in the coffin for Diamond was the pandemic when they shut down, and DC and Marvel were like, "You can't shut down because we have bills to pay too." And
Yep.
guess what? The comic shops, they can't shut down either. They got bills to pay too. And if you don't get comics, that's why it was so important when the local shop opened up here, Alamo Ranch in my area in like 2018. That when the pandemic hit and Diamond wasn't sending their comics, it was touch and go if that business was going to survive.
It
And
didn't. Yeah.
I really believed heavily in that business, you know, surviving, especially in my area of town where, I don't have to drive 20 miles to a comic book store. We live in a big metropolitan area, and
I
it's,
mean, you and me got what, 10, 15 shops in this area.
yeah, but like this one was so close to my house, like
Oh, yeah.
literally 5, 10 minutes away. I was ecstatic, even though they don't sell the old comics like I love. They don't have back issues. I opened up a sub box there. The other big shop in town, um, when Lunar announced it was going to carry DC, they were all in. But some of the nuances that you don't know about Diamond is the fact that although DC was exclusively going through Lunar,
Hmm.
and this is what a lot of comic shops are up against right now, is that Diamond still carried Marvel, although Marvel was largely moving towards Penguin and Random House, right?
Hmm.
Diamond still carried Marvel,
Yeah.
and for a
A lot
lot
of
of
the
these
indies and stuff
shops,
like that too.
yeah, they were established. They knew their ordering system. They got a great discount on shipping for their large orders. So a lot of these comic shops up to this month are still, placing the bulk of their orders from Diamond to get their indie books and their Marvel books, and now that's in jeopardy. So they are scrambling. They're opening up accounts with Penguin, and they're trying to get established there, because one of the big things about one of the big costs, obviously, is the books themselves, but the shipping. And if you can buy in bulk and less packages, you save money. And when your profit margin is thin, like it is in the printing industry, that's enough. Not to mention the toys, the pops, the board games and stuff. Diamond was a one-stop shop, albeit with lots of problems. But when they shut down during COVID, it really hurt a lot of businesses. And so, yeah, the
Yeah,
monopoly
it's
had to break up.
the hard part with Diamond going down. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of people seeing the boat sink and celebrating as it does. But the impact, I think, will be on some of the folks who don't have the options that DC and Marvel do. Right. My understanding on a lot of this is there's a lot of independent publishers who Diamond is the one who distributes their books, and without Diamond, some of these really, really small companies may not have a Lunar or a Penguin to go to, because maybe they don't put enough out there to actually print it. And in a way, Diamond going down because Penguin and Lunar with DC and Marvel respectively, right? Who knows if from a competition standpoint, it kind of seems like the winner, so to speak, of all this might be Marvel and DC, who made these moves to move on, and some of these smaller publishers may pay the price for Diamond until they find alternatives. I think, like you said, Diamond has had a host of issues for years. I mean, me and you are comic book shop exclusively, guys. Me and you do not typically do online orders. I don't do digital comics. I know there has been people for years talking about different indie publishers out there who are online based through Indigo and there's I think it's called Ripaverse or something like that where they do he has his own site and they send the books
Yeah.
directly from there, and I believe he does his own distribution and stuff like that. I don't research those things enough. I don't really look into other indie books. I've always been a big believer in supporting your local comic store, going to your local comic shop. I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, through no fault of the comic book shops that we go to, we've just seen increasing problems with comic books where it's books don't come in on certain days. And like as frustrating as it is for us as the customer, I'm sure for the folks who own the shop, it's 1,000 times more concerning because what you have is you now have where, hey, if I go in and World's Finest wasn't on the table today, it's not that the book didn't come out. The book is still out there. It's available digitally for anybody who wants to do that. And when you have customers where you never know when that's going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, as far as people go, you know what, man, this is a third week in a row. I know the shop you go to, and I'm not going to put their name out there, but they've had problems for months that aren't their problem. That isn't their fault. Their books just aren't coming in on time, right? And it's been the shipping delays. And like as frustrating as it is for you as a customer, it's 1,000 times more frustrating for them because they've got every angry customer saying like, "Man, where are my books?" And that's the weirdest thing for me about comic books with Diamond, and we saw this a lot with CGC too, where CGC kind of has a monopoly over the comic book grading. There's been some alternatives that have opened up, when an industry like comic books is as antiquated as it is and reliant on a certain type of customer who expects on Wednesday I will show up and I will have this, and if I get my books graded they will be through this company. When you have a break in that trust, when you have a breach happen like these ones have with Diamond being unreliable or CGC having some questions about its legitimacy, it really shows the breaks that are in this comic book industry that have led to so much of why it's in a lot of ways dying, because it's hard to get into comic books. If you do get in, the release dates are really hard to keep up with. Even if the release date's right, you don't know if your book's going to make it to the store on time. And so there are a lot of people, I think, who just pivot and go like, hey man, I'm just gonna go digital. I know my book's gonna be there every day. I get it. I don't have to drive to the store. I don't have to worry about variant covers and do they have the one that I want. I just one click, bam, right there, have the book on my phone. And it's really difficult for comic books, I think store owners and stuff like that, to have something like Diamond happen with this and that. While there will be a lot of people, and I think not even necessarily wrongly celebrating, I do wonder, is the impact going to be on the LCSs? How many stores are going to close because of this? How many stores are going to have, if they were getting a mass discount from Diamond, now they have to pay more, and that puts their already thin margins to the point where they're like, hey man, you know what? I'm closing up shop. And we've seen, you and I are lucky because we both live in San Antonio, a larger metropolitan area. I mean, I think there's like 10, 12 stores at least in this area that you can go to. You and I both have our favorites that we go to. But the hard part with this is there's so many shops we've also seen close. For every store that's still open here, you and I have seen plenty of little shops close down or pop up, and globally that's been an issue too. I just do wonder, is this the straw that broke the camel's back for some of these stores that have been hanging on, and now you get more and more delays and more stuff. Is this going to be the pivot point to go? Um, for you on this, I mean, comic book stores, it's an interesting thing. You and I both love that experience, right? That has been a huge thing for us. We love going to the store. Do you think Diamond has a huge impact on that? Like, what do you think this does to the overall industry as far as stores? Like, if you just had to play fortune teller, what do you guess this impact will be? Do you think it'll all continue on, or do you think this will be a devastating thing
I,
for them?
I think it'll break the back of some stores. Fortunately, I think the ones that you and I both love will be okay. They can weather it.
Hmm.
But I start to think of some of the smaller shops that when I travel around Texas, I always look up the local comic shop, in every town that I'm in, and try and go in there. And I don't know how many of those are going to make it, especially if there's no free comic book day. That's
It's a
like
huge marketing point. Yeah.
it's like Christmas because of the sales that they get out of that. Yeah, they give away some free comics, but they also get a lot of sales. So it's kind of like it's kind of like the Black Friday for comic books
Yeah.
in the retail industry. And if that goes away, somebody's going to have to pick up that slack. And I don't know if Lunar or Penguin is going to do that, or if they do put something together, it probably won't happen this year, but they need to do it. I love the experience. The good experience in a comic shop is when you walk in and somebody says hello to you, and you make friends, fellow geeks like yourself. You want to talk about comics and
They
what
can point you in
these.
the direction of different books
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great interactive experience that has carried me through the hobby for years. And but there's those other shops you walk in and nobody says hi to you. Those are unfortunate. But to have a place where you can go and talk to a worker there at the store, or run into somebody as you're looking over the new comics, and what did you think of this one or that one? It's just great. Like, for example, Metamorpho, and you can only do that at a comic shop. Metamorpho. I was at a comic book club on Thursday at my local comic shop, and Dragon's Lair at Alamo Ranch. And Mike, you like the older style comics, and you're gonna like this one because it has the feel of the older comics. And
Yeah.
and he was right. It was like, yeah, it does kind of look and read like an old comic. So I picked up Metamorpho #1, but I would have never done that on my own volition if I was hunting for comics online with some online distributor
Mhm.
or mail order place. I would have never picked up Metamorpho. So it's just
No, I
it's
mean
it's
it is a great point in the amount of books that I only pick up because I go to the shop and someone tells me, "Hey, this is really good," or "You're going to really like this." If it was a digital thing, I mean, I can largely say I probably would see Batman, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Wolverine in my cart, and that would probably be the only books that make it in there. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the impact on this is, and how the overall comic book industry deals with this, and they're like, yeah, Marvel and DC, they'll keep kicking on. They got multi-million or multi-billion dollar organizations behind them. I do worry about the overall shops though, and what that experience is going to be. And it's just funny because I think culturally we've just seen this shift away from things that like you and I as older collectors have in this, and that like the big one for me that hits like physical media. I remember when this happened. I am not a download the movie kind of guy. I go buy the physical copy. Like, and I keep up. I keep Blu-rays and stuff. Like, I'm not sitting here with a VCR looking for the VHS. But like, I noticed when Deadpool and Wolverine came out, I couldn't find a store locally that had a physical copy of it. I had to go on Amazon to get a physical copy of that movie for it to come out. It wasn't at like the normal stops of Target or Walmart or Best Buy. And it's like you look up and like, no, we stopped selling physical media. We don't do that anymore. Everything's become digitized. Like when my kid looks like me, like I'm insane when I like, is there a video game store I can take you to buy you a game? It's like, I'm just gonna download it, Dad. Like, what are you talking about? Right. And I think that's unfortunate. That's probably where comic books is headed with stuff like this, and that eventually this hobby will they be still printing these, a decade from now. I know there's always these naysayers of the industry's going to die, but when you have a major domino like Diamond fall, right, there's going to be impacts on that to some of these smaller publishers where Diamond's the only place that can get their work out, and so it's just going to be interesting. It's one of the things I think that's, to kind of kick this into a larger thing here. This is why you and I don't do the negativity as much on books. And that one of the things I see people doing quite a bit of is I see a lot of people celebrating when comic books are bad because for their channels and for them personally, it gives them the content they want, right? They get to do the video of look how stupid this issue is and how dumb this writer is and how stupid this is and how bad the art is. And again, I think it's important to critique things. I think it's important to call stuff out. But I do think as we sit here, there seems to be a lot of people in the comic book space like openly celebrating and rooting for the downfall of comic books. In that one of the things I'll say is, you and I have been comic book shop guys our entire lives, basically. And if you go in the online space, you see comic book stuff. You'd think that 99.9% of books that are coming out are trash. You'd think that all of them are awful from some places. Or, sadly, there's the converse too, where the people will act like every single book that comes out is amazing. But I just, the weirdest thing for me in the last couple of years I've noticed has disappeared is the discourse around comic books has become so different. This used to be a really easy place to have really interesting and cool conversations. And look, obviously, this is a geeky hobby, right? This is not serious. It's not, religion. It's not your family. It's none of those things that like change the world. But there used to be so many places that you could go where you could just talk about comics, what's good, what's there, what's working, what's not. And it's weird because as the world's become increasingly more digital, the discourse around comic books, man, it's impossible to find. Like you and I used to have, we talked about this all the time when we were in our old job. We would talk about how we loved going to these like chat board sites that used to exist where you could go in and you could talk comics and really have discussions on what y'all think of the issue and what of this and what do you think. Those don't really exist anymore. It's now basically this is the site. Here's the official approved opinion, and if you disagree with it or agree with it, you're an awful person. Or if you agree with it, you're a good person. Or on the other spectrum, it's everything is awful, and if you say anything stinks, you're a sellout who's going. And it's just sad what has happened to all of this, and
Well, you know,
it sucks.
to bring it back to Diamond, there's a lot of people are celebrating that Diamond went
Oh, for
down.
sure, for sure.
Um, and I have mixed feelings about it because of, number one, Free Comic Book Day, which was the best thing ever. When I discovered there was a Free Comic Book Day, I was like, oh my gosh, where have I been? I don't know when it started, but it
Yeah,
started in some period when I wasn't actively collecting.
yeah.
And it was a huge family day for me and my son and his friends and their dads. And,
Oh, they normally tied it into the newest Marvel movie that was
there
coming
was
out, and you could
always
kind
a
of,
new Marvel movie out that week. And, the stores would hype it up. They'd have cosplayers there, bounce house. They'd have superhero related cars in the parking lot. And, the kids got in costume. And it was just It was so much fun. And to have that go away, that's going to impact the industry. Yeah, Diamond had a lot of problems. They didn't do everything right. But to have them just gone is going to affect things. And so, anyway, I don't know what's going to happen on Free Comic Book Day now. I
No,
don't know.
it's so weird, and that like you not to get too deep into the weeds on this, but this has been the weirdest thing in the last couple of years that I have seen. In that, look, I will openly say there are a lot of one of the reasons I avoid finding out anything about the authors of any book that I read is I don't want to know.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
want the work to stand because one of the things that I have seen in the discourse on comic books, movies, everything, because of the world we live in with Twitter and Facebook and all that, you can find out anybody's opinions on absolutely any issue whatsoever. And the thing is, like, I know Mark Wade has been one who's made a lot more noise than others. I know he has shared a lot of public opinions that people either really, really agree with or really, really disagree with. And I can go in, I don't watch the videos, but you can click and see the YouTube thing whenever he says something. There's 20 videos about what an idiot he is or what a genius he is. It just depends, right? But one of the reasons I've always avoided all that stuff, I don't want to know because I just want the work to be the work, right? And that's what I'll always say on this channel. Is like when I talk about a comic book, I don't know who the writer is, right? I think the only writers that I know what they look like now, I know what Scott Snyder looks like now, and I know what's his name, Josh Williamson looks like now because of that DC All In video where they
Yeah,
did the video where they were on camera. The rest of the comic book writers and artists out there, I don't know what many of them look like. I don't know where they're from. I don't know who they voted for. I don't care. I'm going to completely judge it on what was in this, in between these pages, and did you do a good job on it? And the same thing for movies and stuff like that. And what's happened is because that discourse is so publicly entered into comic books now, and some of that's the fault of the writers, some of that's the fault of the people that's involved. There just seems to be a lot of these people out there now because of whatever has been tangled up in that, where they're like openly rooting for things to fail. And I can understand some of that sentiment because if you truly believe that people at Marvel and DC just absolutely can't stand someone like you, I guess I get why you would want it to go. But like, I always come back to this whenever I talk to my wife about this when she tolerates me talking about comic books and comic book movies for a bit. I'm like, as mad as I am at what like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done in the last few years, where I feel like they just drove that thing off a cliff. I don't want Marvel movies to go away. Like
I
I
know.
want them to course correct. I
Yeah,
don't when Marvel makes a movie like and we didn't do a review on the channel, but like The Marvels was a train wreck. It's an awful movie. And it was going to be awful from its very inception. I don't celebrate when that like fails epically. And that what that probably means is if it does awfully, I don't think the message Marvel and DC and them are going to get is we need to fix it. It seems more likely the message that'll eventually go is going to be we just don't make them anymore, right? Like
yeah,
it's kind of what's funny is like I used to TV shows and stuff like that that I used to watch. Like they eventually get to that point you don't watch anymore. Like The Flash is a great example of this. The Flash first couple seasons was a great show, and eventually it got bad and it wasn't as good anymore, and I didn't enjoy it. And I kind of lost touch with it. And I was like, man, they really need to fire all the writers and get new people and stuff like that. But when the show ended, I was genuinely sad because I missed that show. As much as that show had become kind of a watered down version of what it was, it's been weird for me the last couple of years. Like, there's no CW Arrowverse to tune into. There is no Arrow anymore. There is no Flash. It's just dead. And I think that's the thing that's sad about all this is while people are celebrating all this stuff happen, and again, if you have personal animus with these folks, that's your choice. I'm not telling you you should or shouldn't. I just think sometimes we seem to be rooting for things to fail. And it's like, do we really want a place where there are no comics at the shops anymore? There's no comic book shops. There's no Marvel books. There's no DC books. It's all just gone. And that I know if you're an indie publisher person, that's probably what you do want because that knocks them out of competition and stuff. It's just I always when I see stuff like Diamond happening, and then you talk to comic book shop owners and you see the impact it's going to have on them, it's just heartbreaking how much division has come into so much of this stuff that used to be just so simple and clean and fun. That
yeah.
this used to just be this really fun hobby.
And
We
there is good material out
and
there.
there's still great stuff. It's just we've had so many things now where the companies themselves, and I think some of the people who react to this stuff, um, everything's become about monetization. And I guess that's the thing with everything, right? As a religious person, when I read that, money is the root of all evil, every time I see that reacted in the real world, it's like that's truer words have not been spoken. And that's the thing that kills me on so many of these hobbies is how many times you just watch. It's just, man, the last 10 years, I feel like so many brands through greed and just division and anger and it's just heartbreaking, man. We can't get comic books, Star Trek, Star Wars, anything anymore without it just turning into this like
Yeah.
garbage fire of anger. It's really sad. But let us know. What do you guys think below? What do you think about the fact that Diamond has gone bankrupt? What do you think the impact on the industry is going to be? If you're a comic book shop owner, if you want to put some comments down below to put some of this in context, that'd be great if anybody has that. We have a couple comic book shop owner friends. We'll try to see if maybe we can get them on and talk about this in a little more detail. But let us know what you guys think below. As always, folks, thank you so much for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.